Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. I am Thomas Vick, joined by my co-host Seth Wilson. Seth, how's it going today?
Thomas, I'm doing great. It's good to see you and be back recording with you on more of a consistent basis. Seems like we've kind of settled into the summer routine and we're getting rolling. How about yourself?
Things are going well. Had a lunch with, a financial advisor this afternoon, doing some networking, that kind of thing. So really enjoyed that lunch and just ready to get rolling with the podcast today.
That's awesome. Well, what a great segue. I didn't even know that before we kind of talked about today's topic, but obviously one of the big issues for lawyers starting out is getting cases in the door and developing a practice area and a focus area. And also what comes with that in today's day and age is a lot of online potential marketing, and that comes with it reviews from clients and those kind of things. And so we wanted to talk through, I think, a little bit today of how do you handle those reviews? What's the approach or the kind of the policy that you want to have? And maybe even some ideas for dealing with the what I will call likely inevitable negative review that shows up. So, Thomas, why don't you tell me a little bit about your approach and your philosophy in terms of utilizing kind of the online marketing piece and the review process?
Yeah, great question. My approach has been I want Google reviews. I think Google reviews are necessary. We're living in an online world in which people are scouring Google to figure out what's the best place for me. What's the best restaurant? What's the best mechanic? What's the best CPA? And what's the best attorney? And so I think we have different opinions about this, but I feel like attorneys need to be in the practice of seeking online reviews because people are searching on Google and trying to figure out, what's the best feedback that people have given, who has the best reviews, who has the most reviews, and I think it's important not just from, the person that's searching and looking at the specific business, but also from a search engine optimization standpoint. Reviews will help bump you up higher, from my understanding, on the Google search. So the more reviews that you have, the better you're going to rank on a Google search. And people aren't going to go to page 2. They're probably going to stick at, the top 2 or 3 people that are listed on the Google review search results. And they're going to select from that selection. And so the more reviews that you have, the more positive reviews, especially that you have, the more you're going to rank better, the more you're going to be able to convince people to come and see you, give you a call. Um, that's my opinion about reviews generally. We can get into like how I seek them out, but yeah, that's my opinion. And of course, I'm coming at this from an estate planner's perspective, and I'm not coming at it from a general practitioner's standpoint. And that's a little bit of a difference between your firm and my firm. What is your perspective on the online reviews?
I think that last point that you made is really an important distinction for us because I think in terms of developing that niche practice or that focused area that you practice in is better suited to seeking a review or having a review process. I think what I've discovered just over time is when you have a solo firm or a small firm, the best way you're going to get your name out there is through that online presence. And I do agree that having more reviews is sort of a positive thing. Now, we haven't really talked about client confidentiality and all those kind of things. So you got to think through those issues. That's not really the purpose of today's discussion. So check your model rules of professional conduct and those kind of things to ensure that what you're doing is ethically permissible, and read some of the opinions that are out there on getting those reviews and how you navigate with those, because there are some opinions out there about what are the proper steps to take in the event of these kind of discussions. So I think that distinction is really key. And I think really as you're thinking about potentially launching your own law firm, making sure that that's part of the analysis of, okay, am I going to focus on a particular practice area that I can really hone that process around, and it's going to lend itself well to requesting accurate and honest assessments of the work that I did, versus are you a general practice, or what we've talked about before on the podcast, where being a threshold practice, whatever crosses the threshold is the type of law we practice. And that's kind of the counterbalance to that, because when you do that, you're going to open yourself up to a potentially larger client base, but also the more clients you serve, the higher the likelihood that something is going to not go exactly as it should, or the misunderstanding that often happens, which frankly, as I look at a lot of reviews, that tends to be the situation. If you're an attorney reading these reviews, you kind of read between the lines as to what likely happened to cause the client to feel a particular way as a result of that representation. However, that's not your target audience, right? So you're trying to communicate the value of what you do as an attorney to other prospective clients, who are then kind of proof texting against those reviews to assess whether or not to hire you. And so there's really that reality of, you do have to think about this and figure out what your approach is going to be, and be prepared for that reality that's going to come. So in that, Thomas, what kind of has been your approach to responding to, if you do any type of review that may be less than favorable?
Yeah, well, it's always recommended that you respond in some way from a marketing perspective to the review. Whether it's a positive review or a negative review, you want to respond because Google likes that. You're playing with an algorithm, and if you respond, then Google says you're at least a real business and you're responding to people in real time. And that'll get you points in the algorithm. But then if it's a negative review, that's kind of like the last step. It's kind of like the worst nightmare in a lot of ways. Like, if you probably know that you've got a dissatisfied client before the review is ever made. We'll jump back to that, but once that negative review has been posted, I try to respond to it and say, hey, thank you for the review. Please contact us, or something like that, so that we can solve this problem. Because if people look at that and they say, I got a negative review and there was no response whatsoever, then there must be some validity to what that person was saying. And there may be validity to it, or maybe there isn't validity to it, but it shows to the outside world that your law firm cares about what happened and how a client feels, and you're at least trying to make it right. And you got to be genuine with it. I mean, people can see through whether it's fake or if it's real. But prior to that bad review, you got to go through every possible step to make sure that client is happy. The loudest client is sometimes the most dissatisfied client. So if somebody is kind of barking at you, you need to give your attention to that person and try to get them satisfied. And they still may not walk away with the result that they wanted. The law is what the law is. But if you can kind of help them to understand, I'm sorry that it happened the way that this did. We are trying to do everything that, we tried to do everything that we could, but it just didn't work out, rather than just kind of ignoring the client. I feel like if you ignore the client, that's the moment that you're going to get a bad negative review. So those are some steps to take to avoid a negative review, but also if it happens, make sure that there is some kind of response to that negative review so that other people can see you're trying to make it right.
Yeah, those are great thoughts, Thomas. I think you need to be careful to not try and justify yourself or defend yourself and those kind of things, but really approach it with that client focus of, we wish we could have worked this out, before you posted all this on the internet. And so the counter to that is, again, just being aware of sometimes I'm not even sure I want to confirm whether or not we ever represented these
That's
individuals
true.
because I don't know for sure what usernames they have access to, or, it could be anonymous or it could be a nickname or something, and you can't really tell who it is. I think I agree that most of the time we know who that is if they're going to post something about that. But I think my approach has always been, if I've done everything I can to try to salvage whatever was happening at the time to make sure it's an accurate representation of who we are, we do want to work it out, and we do want to make sure that we've done everything we can. And sometimes you can't reach a agreement on things, and or the facts just aren't going to be there, or the law doesn't apply in a particular scenario in a way that met expectations. And so I think you need to also be willing as the lawyer to accept what truth there may be in that review and assess how you can do better, and use that as an after action review of that situation or that case type or whatever it is. And you're going to get stung a little bit. Those negative things hurt to hear, and yet once you've kind of gone through the grieving process of receiving that review and worked through that, I think it can be helpful for you to help you be better the next time, or take that situation and avoid that pitfall that may have happened there. So great thoughts there, I think, too, in terms of that ongoing communication, if you can, with that client, trying to keep the conversation going.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was listening to somebody talk the other day about how we remember our negative feedback much more than we remember our positive feedback that we get. And the negative reviews that I've received, it happens to everybody. The negative reviews that I've received over the years, those are the ones that I remember the most, and maybe those are the ones that I learned the most from too. And so, yeah, you got to take things with a grain of salt. There may be some truth to what was said in that negative review, and use that to make yourself better. So yeah, and as far as not wanting to confirm representation, yeah, I mean, for sure, there definitely are times where you don't want to do that. It could be that somebody that's not your client, maybe actually is the opposing party, will post something on Google against you. And one of the features of Google is that you can have a review reviewed by the Google team, and if there was no connection between the attorney and the poster, then Google might sweep those away and delete them. So, and I've had that happen before in my practice, where somebody posted and they were affiliated with the case, but they weren't my client. Gave me a 5-star review though, but weren't associated with me directly. So yeah, there are some things that you can do to make sure that you're regulating what's happening with your online profile. And if you're in a certain niche when it comes to your practice areas, I encourage people to ask for those reviews, especially if you've got somebody that is a positive client that really appreciates what you've done for them. Ask that person for a review. And as you're getting your systems in place, get to a point where you've got a system for asking for those reviews, if that's what you're going to be seeking, because then it kind of takes the guesswork out of it. You just know, when I move this client's file over to this section, I'm going to have an email that's sent out asking for a review, and boom, before I know it, there's a Google review that is posted, and that's positive because it was recently, the work was recently done, and that can be a really great thing. So from my perspective, my law practice has benefited from Google reviews. A lot of people will say, I got in touch with you because I saw great reviews, and we don't do things to necessarily please men in terms of biblical language, but we do want to make sure that we have a good reputation to the extent that we can.
Yeah, and I think that's really the biggest key is your reputation is vital. And so if there's inaccuracies or inaccurate representations about who you are and what you do, and you can do something about that, it's worthwhile to investigate what can be done and take those steps if possible to correct those inaccuracies. And so that's really kind of those decision frameworks that you're going to work through to figure out, hey, what are the options here to preserve and protect the integrity and present an accurate portrayal of who we are and what we do. And I think the point of, if you have more recent positive reviews, those will push the negative ones down, and as years go by, you build up that positive reputation, if you will, over time. And again, just always cautious, because lawyers have some real particular, shall we say, guidelines in terms of what we can say about ourselves or what our clients can say about us as well, in terms of, is that considered some sort of endorsement or something like that. So make sure you read the ethical rules, especially when it comes to that, and ensure that you are in compliance with those rules as you work through these processes. But bottom line is, if you're doing any kind of work, you're subjecting yourself to potential risk for that. If you do well, hopefully that comes back, and if you're not doing well, you got to be aware of that, right? And be careful and cautious about how you fix that moving forward.
Yeah, all good points there for sure. Yeah. So another suggestion that I might have is, if you're seeking out these Google reviews, you might go one step further and add some material to your Google business profile, because the Google business profile allows you to post articles from your website. And if you've got pictures from your blog or whatever, those pictures can show up on your Google business profile, and it makes it look real nice. And, as you update that on a fairly regular basis, people will see that. And again, you're getting points when it comes to the algorithm. The more that you're able to post to your Google business profile, the more points you get, and more people are going to see you, just like the more people are going to see you if you have recent reviews. So another suggestion there for your online profile.
Yeah, that's a great tool that is available. So you have the Google Business Profile. If you haven't claimed that for your business, or you're just getting started, that's something to really think about, how to get that in place and get it structured and set up correctly. Make it easy for people to find you and see what the hours of operation are. Again, it will sort of collect those reviews under that place as well. And Thomas, as you mentioned, kind of that content and awareness piece helps drive that through the Maps program as well. If folks are using Google Maps and kind of searching around, can surface your law firm to them, and that's a good thing. Apple also has its Apple Maps program and Apple Business Profiles and those kind of things. So that may be something to consider as well as you're looking at that. But again, I'm not anyway, a marketing expert by any stretch of the imagination, at least as it comes to kind of the social side. I always help think those things through in terms of content and presentation, but the delivery of that is a whole subspecialty, and there's folks who are far better at it than I am that get that stuff done. But it is important, I think, as the attorneys, launching your firm, to understand what avenues are available for you to reach out to prospective clients, folks who may need your services in the very services and way and manner in which you're going to be able to offer them. And so how do you get that information out in front of the people that need it at the right time is always kind of a work in progress. But these are some great tools to utilize to help credential you a little bit. You mentioned your website or your blog and those kind of things. I know you do a newsletter electronically on a consistent basis. Obviously, the podcast is a possibility. There's just so many available options in today's marketplace, but everybody else is also using those same options. So you have to figure out, how do you present your unique value proposition? What is it about you and your firm that the client should consider when evaluating all their choices?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hoping that as much as we've talked about Google today, that our YouTube views are just going to skyrocket because of the content of this particular video. We'll see if that's right, but I think it's got a chance. We'll find out.
We're trying to figure out what the algorithms do, as is everybody else in the world, I suppose. But no, really great. That's a great point, Thomas, because I think the key really is that integrity piece, right? For you and I, we really want to share information that we've learned just based on our experience, which you can't replicate unless you've gone through it. So if you can learn from some of the things that we've done that help you sort of accelerate the launch of your law firm, that's really the goal. And that's kind of what we're passionate about on this podcast, is just providing those tools, ideas, issues that we face every single day, and how do we address those, how do we think through them and provide that as a resource. And we mentioned on our last recording, I think it was, that one of the goals for the fall is to start bringing in conversations with law firm leaders and just hearing their stories and what's been helpful for them. A couple of weeks ago, we had Ray Adler of our office on, and it's just so much fun to talk through these issues and these law practice management type questions, because that's ultimately what we want to do, is develop that lifetime legacy practice. And that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, it really is, for sure. We are the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer Podcast. We're helping lawyers launch, and just right on point with the content of today's episode. I ask that you leave a comment on the YouTube chat or subscribe to the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer Podcast. Do all the things for the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer Podcast so that we can get these views up and more people can, we can help more people with helping their practices get going. So encourage everybody to do that, and we appreciate it as always. Seth, any final thoughts?
No, just again, that's how this grows. We're not doing any kind of back end marketing or anything like that. We're really just trying to develop a library of helpful content for folks. And so those likes and subscribes really help kind of push that content out and about. And I know we have the audio podcast as well, if that's your preferred method of listening to things. And so just again, this is kind of our passion project that we hope to keep continuing down the road. And you can check us out on YouTube. It's probably the easiest way. Leave a comment, and we'll try to respond to it if we can on a future episode.
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, Thomas.